Now, it's time to look at the next step in intelligence analysis. We have seen the enemy's intent, but what are his capabilities? What are the Turks really capable of? Let's look at the Turkish armed forces, led by the 65-year-old General Yaşar Güler. Global firepower gives us a lot of information, but I want to point out to some specific numbers. According to them, the Turkish Army has 350,000 active duty personnel with 207 fighter jets. They have 2,446 main battle tanks. That is a lot of armor. And also, they have 9,031 armored troop carriers and 1,108 self-propelled artillery. We don't know what percentage of these vehicles, these machines may be operational, but that's still a lot of them. In intelligence, we assume that they're all working properly. So, because you never know, so we cannot assume anything less than that. Also, another website, globalsecurity.org, tells us the order of battle, as it is called. And according to them, the Turkish army is actually has three different armies. First army, headquartered in Istanbul. Second army, headquartered in Malatya. And third army, headquartered in Erzincan. There's actually a fourth army, but their responsibility area of operation is more in the islands. So let's focus on, well, the first army has four armored brigades. Four armored brigades are basically tanks. And they also have 7 mechanized infantry brigades. Mechanized infantry are those guys that are riding on mechanized vehicles. They're not, so they're mobile just as much as tanks because they're not walking. So that's infantry on mechanized vehicles. The second army in Malatya has 3 armored brigades and 4 mechanized infantry brigades. The third army in Erzincan is, they have 1 armored brigade and 7 mechanized infantry brigades. According to them, the Turkish army has a total of 9 armored brigades and 19 mechanized infantry brigades. Now, they have some other units, but I want to focus just on armor and mechanized infantry. Let us look specifically at the most important and relevant brigades of the Turkish Second Army, headquartered in Malatya. There is the 6th Corps, which is headquartered in Adana. And this corps, the 6th Corps, has the 5th Armored Brigade in Gaziantep, which is only 540 kilometers from the Golan Heights. They also have the 39th Mechanized Infantry Brigade, headquartered in Iskenderun, another city very close to Israel. Their 7th Corps, headquartered in Diyarbakir, has the 6th Mechanized Infantry in Tatvan, along with the 16th Mechanized Infantry Brigade in Bilgakisla, and the 70th Mechanized Infantry Brigade in Kisiltepe. Finally, the 8th Corps, headquartered in Elazig, has the 20th Armored Brigade in Sanliurfa and the 172nd Armored Brigade in Silopi. As I mentioned before, they have some other units, such as artillery regiments, regular infantry brigades, and mountain brigades, just to name a few. But I want to focus just on these armor and mechanized infantry, and also some self-propelled artillery, because being mechanized, they have the speed and mobility for such an attack as what we are exploring in our presentation. Now, let's continue. Ve'amim ravim otach, and a great multitude with you. Who is this great multitude? There is certainly no shortage of Mohammedans, Muslims, Islamists, whatever you want to call them, who would be more than happy to volunteer to be part of a presumed destruction of Israel. As we have mentioned, Islamists from Iran, Sudan, and Libya would be more than happy to join such an operation. Now, I want to take a tangent here to explore a different angle. What about the Russians? Although many Christians and some Jews believe that Gog may be Russia, there is simply no scriptural connection between the places Ezekiel would have identified with his names in any geographical region in Russia today. But if we just for a moment entertain the idea that Russia could be Gog, logistically it is nearly impossible. Consider that Turkey is only roughly 450 to 500 kilometers from Israel, whereas Russia's nearest bases are 3 times that distance at 1,500 kilometers. Yet, if they were to do it, how would they do it? Would they do it by land, by sea, by air? If they go by land, they would have to go through the Caucasus Mountains, through Georgia, and northern Turkey. And even if they had a much stronger army and solid air support, they would still lose a lot of their armor through the narrow passes of so much mountainous terrain. It would be just a battle to get to the battle. Now, the Germans conducted an armor advance similar in distance in World War II when they launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941. By the time they got to Stalingrad, today Volgograd, their supply lines were overly stretched. Yes, they were fighting the Soviet army along the way, but they had fairly flat terrain to go across. And the capability of the German panzers were not tested to the limits of that the Russian T-80s and T-90s would be going through such mountainous, rough terrain. So I doubt that any Russian leader, whether military or political, would want to waste their armor in a land trek of 1,500 kilometers through very mountainous terrain and plenty of enemy opposition. Why enemy opposition? If they were to go by land, they have to go through Georgia, and then they have to go through Turkey. Turkey would see that as an invasion of their land, and they would send their tanks against them. So it would be a battle just to get to the battle. Logistically, I would not even consider this option. It's just not feasible. Let's look at a maritime deployment. Would the Russians rely on their second fleet based in Sevastopol and other Crimean ports? The Russians do not have such a great support navy, ships to carry all this armor. And even if they did, they would have to go through the Bosphorus Straits. Again, this would unleash a war with Turkey, because Turkey would see that through satellite images that Russia is loading up armor, war-ready, battle-ready equipment. And if they see that this ship is going to Syria, they would feel themselves encircled, as they would think that the Russia is trying to surround Turkey by putting armor land units south of Turkey. So such massive deployment of land units through Turkey would be very dangerous for Russia as well. What about by air? Could they deploy such a massive number of troops by air? Russia does have some very good transport aircraft, and they could do this. However, if we again look at similar operations, we can think of Operation Desert Shield, where the United States and the Allied forces deployed thousands of armor pieces and hundreds of thousands of troops. And it took the American Armed Forces several months. Now, one of the reasons, this is not the only reason, but one of the reasons that this operation was so successful is that Iraq did nothing. They did not attack U.S. forces when the U.S. was at their weakest, basically setting up bases in Saudi Arabia. So I doubt that either Israel, Turkey, or the U.S. Forces, for that matter, would simply sit idly and allow Russia to slowly build up its ground forces in Syria. I also consider this option not a very good one for Russia. So either one of the three options brings plenty of logistical problems for them. So I just don't see them pulling it off. Let's go back to Turkey and the relatively short distance from South Turkey to northern Israel, which is roughly, as we have mentioned before, 500 kilometers. We continue reading in passages 10 and 11 of Ezekiel 38. Yalud varim al levavecha. Things rose up in your heart. V'chashavta machshevet ra'ah. And you thought an evil thought. As we saw before, Mr. Erdogan's intentions toward Israel are not good. Moreover, in his dealings with other world leaders, he clearly comes across as he's full of himself, very egotistical, and he even considers himself to be the last imam. So he clearly shows his anti-Semitism and his pro-Islam stance. Ve'amarta alel eretz Parshot, and you said, I will go up to the land of unwalled towns. For a long time, I did not believe that we would be in the days of this prophecy because of Israel's security barrier. I thought that simply because this barrier was in place, we were not in the times of this prophecy. However, the security barrier is an area barrier, not a point barrier. This is just something that I have just recently come to realize. It blocks the entrance from one general area to another, but it does not block the entrance to any specific town. The town themselves have no barriers. Certainly, no barriers offering any tactical protection against an invading army. The barriers we do see on some towns offer protection against individual terrorists, but no protections against an invasion. Avo hashoktim yoshvei lebetach. I will come to those who dwell quietly and in safety. Here is one clear example as to why I do not trust translations. Some have translated this passage to say, I will come quietly. But if you're coming like a storm, with many brigades and a great multitude, and all with swords and helmets and shields, or in today's warfare with tanks, with artillery, you are not coming quietly. Also, grammatically in Hebrew, you clearly read the adjective quietly does not follow the first person of I will come, but rather it is in plural, just like the word who dwell, as in those who dwell. It is the people dwelling in safety who are quiet, not the invading army. Certainly, Israel is not a nation that likes to boast, look at me, look what I'm doing, look what I've accomplished. Rather, Israel as a nation goes about minding its own business, producing, developing, advancing in technology, in farming development, in medicine, and in many other fields. But if we are constantly making front headlines, it is because of the constant terrorist attacks launched against us, the constant wars launched against us, and the constant UN resolutions against us by all of the anti-Semites in the UN.